It's swelling so fast. The maid lifted her skirt and did something the billionaire could not imagine. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to the main character. Her name is Elena Moore, and at 2:17 in the morning, she is on her knees on cold marble, the smell of lemon cleaner still clinging to her sleeves, staring at a man who has never learned how to ask for help. Julian Cross leans against the bathroom wall of the penthouse suite, barefoot, pale, breathing through his teeth as if pain were a language he refuses to speak out loud. The light above them hums. Somewhere below, the city keeps moving, unaware that something inside his leg is changing by the second. Elena notices it first. The swelling is wrong, spreading fast beneath the skin, tight and glossy, climbing higher than it should. She has seen this before, years ago. In a hospital corridor she swore she would never walk again. Her heart starts counting time the way nurses do, not in minutes, but in consequences. Julian tries to straighten, pride forcing his spine rigid, and his voice cuts low and sharp, telling her to leave, telling her to call security, telling her not to touch him. He does not see a rescuer. He sees a maid crossing a line. Elena hears only the clock in her head. 15 minutes, maybe less, before damage turns permanent. She glances at the door, at the rules printed on the badge at her chest, at the life she cannot afford to lose, and then back at his leg. The fabric of her uniform clings, an obstacle, a hesitation. Her hands shake once. Then she makes a decision that will follow her long after this night. She lifts her skirt just enough to move freely, just enough to do what must be done, and the room seems to hold its breath. Julian's eyes widen, shock flashing not with desire, but with disbelief. No one disobeys him. No one ever chooses him over themselves. Elena kneels closer, explaining in a whisper meant to steady them both, talking about circulation, about pressure, about how fast things can go wrong when blood does not move the way it should. She tells him she studied nursing once, that she did not finish, that it does not matter now. What matters is his leg, the heat, the swelling, the seconds draining away. Her fingers hover, waiting for permission she knows she may not get. Julian swallows, the fight leaving his shoulders inch by inch, and in that small surrender something fragile opens between them. He nods. It is barely there, but it is enough. Elena acts. She braces, presses, ties a makeshift restraint with practiced care, every movement precise despite the tremor in her hands. Julian inhales sharply, then exhales, focusing on her voice as if it were a lifeline. For the first time in years, he trusts someone without knowing what it will cost. And for Elena, in this silent, forbidden space, the world narrows to a single truth. If she fails him, nothing else will matter. Outside, thunder rolls faintly, and the building's generators kick, a reminder that power is never as stable as it pretends to be. Elena feels sweat bead at her spine, feels the weight of eyes that are not there, yet somehow watching. She keeps her voice low, steady, promising nothing, asking only that he stay still, that he breathe, that he let her finish. In that moment, Maid and Billionaire disappear, leaving two humans negotiating fear, trust, and the fragile hope that doing the right thing might be enough before the consequences arrive and change them forever, all by the time dawn presses a thin gray line against the windows of the Cross Grand Hotel. Elena Moore is back in the service corridor, hands scrubbed raw, heart still racing, as if the night never released her. The events in the penthouse feel unreal now, like something borrowed from another life. Yet the faint ache in her knees reminds her it all happened. Part 2 of this story does not begin with Julian Cross, even though his name owns the building and the city seems to bend around his will. It begins with Elena pushing a linen cart down a narrow hallway, reminding herself to breathe, reminding herself that whatever happened upstairs does not change who she is down here. This is her world, the quiet before guests wake, the hum of industrial dryers, the scent of starch and disinfectant. Just hours earlier, she had been an invisible presence in this hotel, another uniform blending into the background, trained to lower her eyes, and move quickly. Now every sound feels amplified, every step watched, even though no one has said a word. She replays the night in fragments. The way Julian's voice lost its edge when the pain sharpened, the moment his pride cracked enough to let her help, the trust that flickered between them like a fragile match in the dark. Elena tells herself it was only a medical emergency, nothing more, yet her chest tightens with the knowledge that she crossed a line that never forgives. She knows the rules. She knows the stories whispered among staff about instant termination, about silence agreements, about people who disappear after touching the wrong guest. Elena has already lost enough in her life to recognize the sound of consequences approaching. As she folds towels, her mind drifts backward, to the version of herself that wore scrubs instead of a maid's uniform, to late nights studying anatomy by a flickering lamp, to the day everything stopped when her mother fell ill and tuition became an impossible luxury. Leaving nursing school was not a choice so much as a quiet surrender, one she never fully forgave herself for. Working here pays the rent and keeps the lights on, but it also keeps her past locked away, a skill set no one wants to know about until it saves them. Across the building, Julian Cross wakes in a hospital bed with his leg elevated and wrapped, monitors blinking softly beside him. Doctors speak in calm tones about timing, about how close it was, about how someone recognized the signs early enough to prevent irreversible damage. Julian listens, but his thoughts are not on the prognosis. He keeps seeing Elena's face, the concentration etched into her features, the way she did not hesitate once she decided, the way she spoke to him without fear when it mattered. For a man used to command, that memory unsettles him more than the pain ever did. He asks a single question, quietly, about the maid who found him. No one answers directly. Back in the hotel, Elena is called into a supervisor's office just before the morning rush. The air is stiff, polite, edged with something unspoken. They ask her where she was assigned last night, whether she entered any guest rooms without clearance, whether she understands the seriousness of protocol. Elena answers honestly, because lies have never sat well with her, even when truth costs more. She does not mention Julian's name. She does not defend herself. She simply states that there was an emergency, and she acted. The supervisor's expression hardens, not with anger but with caution, the look of someone already protecting the institution over the individual. Elena leaves the office unsure whether she still has a job, unsure whether doing the right thing will be remembered as bravery or as a violation. Meanwhile, Julian signs discharge papers with an impatience that surprises his doctors. He insists on returning home, on handling things personally, on understanding exactly who Elena Moore is and why her presence feels like a question he has avoided his entire life. As Elena clocks out at the end of her shift, the city sunlight feels harsher than usual, and she cannot shake the sense that her life has tilted off its familiar axis. She does not know it yet, but the quiet collision between her hidden past and his guarded present has only begun, and the choice she made on that marble floor is about to follow both of them into a future neither planned. All when Elena Moore returns to work 2 days later, the Cross Grand Hotel feels different, not louder or harsher, but heavier, as if the walls themselves are aware of something unsaid. Her uniform fits the same, the badge still rests against her chest, yet the distance between her and everything else has widened. She moves through the lobby with her eyes lowered, just as she has been trained, but now she notices how people part instinctively when Julian Cross's name is spoken, how managers straighten their backs when an elevator chimes, how power here is not announced but assumed. Elena understands power in a different way, as rent due dates and grocery lists, as the quiet panic of a checking account that never quite recovers. The contrast presses on her with every step. Julian Cross, meanwhile, watches the hotel through security feeds from his office, leg propped carefully, suit immaculate despite the lingering pain. From above, people look like patterns, efficient and small, and for years that distance made everything simpler. Yet now, his attention keeps narrowing to one name on a staff roster, one face that does not belong to his world but somehow disrupted it. He recalls how Elena spoke to him without reverence, how she chose action over permission, and it unsettles his carefully ordered hierarchy. He summons department heads not to punish, but to ask questions he has never asked before, about procedures, about emergencies, about how often rules protect liability rather than lives. The answers come polished and cautious, designed to satisfy a man like him, yet they ring hollow. Downstairs, Elena is reassigned to quieter floors, a subtle demotion disguised as routine, and she understands the message clearly. She is being managed out without confrontation. The power gap reveals itself in small humiliations, in schedules changed without notice, in supervisors who avoid her gaze, in the way her presence suddenly feels inconvenient. She tells herself to endure, because endurance has always been her skill, because leaving without another job is not an option. Still, a part of her resents how easily her courage became a liability. Julian visits the hotel floor for the first time since the incident, moving carefully, accompanied by an assistant who speaks only when spoken to. Staff stiffen as he passes. Elena senses him before she sees him, the way tension shifts in a room when gravity changes. She keeps folding linens, hands steady, refusing to look up. When his shadow falls across her station, the air tightens. Julian does not speak immediately. In silence, the distance between Billionaire and Maid stretches thin enough to feel fragile. He notices the way she braces, expecting consequence rather than gratitude, and something sharp twists in his chest. This is the cost of power, he realizes, the ease with which it isolates him from accountability. He thanks her, quietly, without witnesses, without ceremony. The words are simple, inadequate, but sincere. Elena nods once, accepting nothing more, and returns to her task. The interaction lasts seconds, yet it ripples through both of them. For Elena, it confirms that he sees her, even if the system does not. For Julian, it confirms that seeing is not the same as fixing. Later that evening, Julian reviews Elena's personnel file, the thinness of it striking him, the absence of ambition where there should have been. Opportunity. He learns about her unfinished nursing education, about commendations buried under routine evaluations, about a life narrowed by necessity. The power gap stops being abstract and becomes personal. Elena, unaware of his research, counts tips at home, calculating how many weeks she can last if the next schedule cuts deeper. She tells herself not to expect anything from a man like Julian Cross, not to confuse a moment of shared urgency with a shift in reality. Yet when her phone buzzes with a request from management to report to human resources the next morning, her pulse spikes. She does not know whether she is about to lose her job or her anonymity. Julian, standing alone in his office, makes a decision that feels both obvious and dangerous, one that challenges the structure that built him. He understands now that rescue did not end on a marble floor, that the true divide is not money but agency, and that crossing it will demand more than gratitude. As night settles over the city, both of them sense that the quiet balance holding their worlds apart is about to fracture, and whatever comes next will test whether power can learn restraint, whether kindness can survive scrutiny, and whether one forbidden choice can reshape two lives in ways neither of them can yet imagine. All the morning Elena Moore steps into the human resources office. The air feels thinner, as if the building itself is holding its breath. The room smells faintly of coffee and printer toner, ordinary scents that clash with the quiet dread tightening her chest. She sits with her hands folded, posture careful, already rehearsing how she will explain herself without sounding defensive, already calculating how much time she has before rent becomes a problem she cannot solve. Across the city, Julian Cross watches the same morning unfold from behind glass walls and polished steel, his legs still aching when the weather shifts, a reminder that vulnerability does not disappear simply because it is inconvenient. He remembers the swelling, the speed of it, the certainty in Elena's voice when she said waiting was not an option, and he feels an unfamiliar impatience with systems that pretend neutrality while quietly punishing the brave. Elena is told the meeting is procedural, that no decision has been made, that the company must review liability concerns. The words are smooth, impersonal, designed to distance responsibility from consequence. She nods, listens, answers questions with precision, refusing to beg for leniency. When she leaves the office, she is handed a revised schedule with fewer hours and reassigned duties that keep her far from guests. It is not termination, but it is a warning. Elena understands the language well. Survival means compliance. Meanwhile, Julian calls his legal team, not to threaten, but to understand. He asks what would have happened if Elena had followed protocol, if she had waited for security and paramedics. The answer is blunt. The risk would have been significant. Julian closes his eyes, the weight of that hypothetical pressing hard. The hotel protected itself. Elena protected him. The difference matters more than any quarterly report. That afternoon, Julian walks the hotel again, slower this time, attentive to details he once ignored. He notices how employees flinch at raised voices, how fear keeps everything running smoothly until it suddenly does not. When he passes Elena's floor, he pauses, not to speak, but to observe. She works with the same quiet focus, her expression neutral, yet there is a restraint to her movements now, a carefulness that suggests she has learned not to draw attention. The power gap stretches wider, not in wealth, but in consequence. Julian returns to his office and drafts a proposal that challenges existing policy, one that reframes emergency response protocols to prioritize action over hierarchy. His advisors caution him, warn him about precedent, about opening doors that cannot be easily closed. Julian listens, then sets the document aside. This is not about policy alone. It is about a person who acted when others would have waited. Elena finishes her shift exhausted, the emotional toll heavier than the physical work. On her way out, she checks her phone, finding a voicemail from an unknown number. She does not listen to it yet. Some part of her wants the day to end without new complications. She boards the bus home, watching the city blur past, thinking about the version of herself that once believed skill and compassion would be enough. At home, she listens to the message. A calm voice asks her to meet, not as an employee, but as a witness to an event that may have saved a life. There is no apology, no explanation, just an invitation that feels loaded with expectation. Elena considers ignoring it. She has learned that proximity to power often costs more than it gives. Julian, alone again, replays the night in his mind, not with fear, but with clarity. He recognizes the moment he stopped being the man who commanded and became the man who listened. That shift unsettles him, because it suggests change is possible, and change threatens structures built on distance. He decides to speak not through intermediaries, but directly, to acknowledge Elena not as a risk, but as an equal in that moment of crisis. Elena arrives at the meeting location unsure whether she is stepping into resolution or further complication. The room is neutral, intentionally so, stripped of hierarchy. Julian greets her without formality, without witnesses. He does not offer money or favors. Instead, he offers acknowledgement, a rare currency in his world. He tells her what the doctors said, how close it was, how her decision altered the outcome. Elena listens, arms crossed, protecting herself from hope. She has heard gratitude before that evaporated under scrutiny. Julian senses her skepticism and does not try to persuade her. He asks a single question, quietly, about why she left nursing school. The question lands softly, yet it opens something raw. Elena answers honestly, about obligation, about sacrifice, about how life narrowed around her without asking permission. Julian hears in her story a reflection of his own compromises, made in pursuit of control rather than care. When the meeting ends, nothing is resolved on paper, but something has shifted beneath the surface. Elena leaves with more questions than answers. Julian remains, understanding that rescue is not a single act, but a series of choices, each one carrying consequences that cannot be undone. Both sense that the balance between them has changed, and that the next step, whatever it is, will demand more courage than the first. All days pass without resolution, and the tension settles into a quieter, more dangerous shape. Elena Moore returns to her routine, yet nothing feels routine anymore. Every shift carries an undercurrent of anticipation, as if something unseen is moving closer. She notices small changes first. Her schedule stops shrinking. The reassigned duties quietly reverse. Supervisors who once avoided her now speak with careful neutrality. No one explains why. Elena does not ask. Experience has taught her that clarity is rarely given freely. She focuses on work, on the precise comfort of tasks she can control, even as her thoughts drift to the unanswered space Julian Cross has left in her life. She tells herself the meeting meant nothing beyond acknowledgement, that powerful men often soothe their conscience with words, and then move on. And yet, she cannot forget the way he listened, not like a man collecting information, but like someone measuring the cost of a truth he had ignored. Julian, for his part, finds that recovery brings no relief. His leg heals, but the quiet it leaves behind is uncomfortable. He notices how often his thoughts return to Elena, to the steadiness in her voice, to the way she acted without permission when permission would have been safer. The slow burn of awareness unsettles him. He begins asking questions that do not fit neatly into board meetings or financial forecasts. He reviews emergency protocols again, then requests data on employee turnover, on disciplinary actions tied to liability avoidance. Patterns emerge that he cannot unsee. The hotel, the brand, the empire he built prides itself on efficiency, yet it quietly discourages initiative when initiative risks exposure. Julian realizes Elena is not an anomaly. She is a mirror. Their paths cross again in fragments. A brief exchange in a service hallway where their eyes meet longer than necessary. A nod that carries more meaning than conversation. Elena feels the weight of being noticed in a place designed to erase her presence. She does not know whether it empowers or endangers her. The slow burn takes shape in restraint, in what is not said. Julian resists the impulse to intervene directly, aware that overt protection could isolate Elena further. He chooses instead to observe, to learn the rhythms of a world he has always controlled from above. Elena senses this shift without understanding it fully. She feels less alone, yet more exposed. At home, she revisits old textbooks she never threw away, running her fingers over pages that once represented a future she abandoned. The memory of Julian asking about nursing lingers, stirring something hopeful and painful at once. She wonders why he would care, and whether caring is ever safe when power is involved. One evening, a minor incident unfolds on a guest floor. Nothing dramatic, but enough to test boundaries. A guest collapses briefly, disoriented. Staff hesitate, protocol dictating who should respond. Elena steps forward instinctively, catching herself just before acting. She remembers the warning in human resources, the quiet demotion, the fragile balance she now occupies. The pause costs seconds. Another staff member intervenes eventually. The guest recovers, but the delay is noted. Elena feels the weight of restraint settle heavily. She understands now that fear, not incompetence, is the true risk. Julian reviews the incident report later, noting Elena's name among witnesses. He recognizes the hesitation for what it is. The slow burn becomes resolve. He requests a meeting with senior management, framing it as a discussion about values rather than rules. The conversation is tense, careful, filled with corporate language designed to obscure responsibility. Julian listens, then speaks with a calm that carries more authority than anger ever could. He asks whether the company wants employees who follow rules blindly or people who think critically when lives are at stake. The question lingers unanswered. Meanwhile, Elena receives another message from an unknown number, shorter this time, asking if she would consider a temporary assignment outside her usual duties. No promises, no details. Just a request. She hesitates, aware that every step closer to Julian's orbit increases risk. Yet something in her refuses to retreat entirely. She agrees to meet. When they speak again, it is not about rescue or gratitude. It is about possibility. Julian outlines a pilot program, a quiet initiative to train select staff in emergency response, drawing on existing skills that have been overlooked. He asks Elena to consult, not as a symbol, but as a professional. The offer is careful, respectful, leaving room for refusal. Elena listens, heart pounding. This is not a promotion or a reward. It is an invitation to reclaim a part of herself she buried to survive. She asks one question, softly, about what happens if the program fails. Julian answers honestly, saying failure will be his responsibility. The slow burn tightens, not with romance alone, but with shared risk. Elena senses the weight of choice pressing close. Accepting could change her standing, her safety, her future. Declining would preserve the fragile status quo. As they part, neither touches, neither promises. Yet both understand that something fundamental is shifting. The quiet tension between them now carries direction, and the next step, once taken, will be impossible to reverse. All the shift from possibility to consequence happens quietly, the way most irreversible things do. Elena Moore agrees to consult on the pilot program, telling herself it is temporary, professional, contained. The first session is held in a closed conference room away from guests, stripped of branding, just tables, chairs, and a whiteboard. Julian Cross arrives without entourage, without suit jacket, the subtle signal that this is not a performance. Elena notices the effort and resents how much it affects her. She speaks carefully, outlining practical protocols, emphasizing judgment over hierarchy, explaining how seconds matter when systems freeze. Her voice steadies as she teaches, muscle memory returning, confidence resurfacing like a forgotten tide. Julian listens without interrupting, taking notes with the same focus he once reserved for acquisitions. The room feels different when he treats her expertise as authority. It is not romantic in any obvious way, yet something intimate forms in the shared seriousness of the work. Over the next weeks, the program expands quietly. A handful of staff participate, grateful and nervous, learning how to act without waiting for permission. Elena leads drills, corrects mistakes, encourages questions. She feels useful in a way she has not felt in years. Julian attends intermittently, absorbing the subtle shift in culture. He watches Elena command respect without demanding it, and the slow burn between them tightens, fueled by admiration rather than desire. Yet the power gap never disappears. It hovers in the background, shaping every interaction, every glance that lingers a fraction too long before breaking away. The turning point arrives on a night that mirrors the first, though the stakes feel heavier. A high-profile event fills the hotel, donors and executives crowding the halls. Elena is not scheduled to be on duty, but she stays late to help finalize preparations for the next training session. Somewhere between speeches and champagne, a guest collapses near the ballroom, symptoms escalating fast. This time, Elena does not hesitate. She steps in, directs nearby staff, begins assessment. The response is swift, effective, the result of weeks of preparation. Julian witnesses it from across the room, the scene unfolding with controlled urgency. The guest stabilizes, paramedics arrive, and the crisis passes without spectacle. Applause does not follow. Instead, whispers begin. Protocol questions surface. Liability concerns rise. In the aftermath, management convenes an emergency meeting, their gratitude thinly veiled by fear. Elena is called in, her presence suddenly controversial. The same courage that saved a life now threatens to expose the company. Julian sits at the head of the table, feeling the familiar pull toward decisiveness. He could shut this down, protect the brand, sacrifice the program, and Elena with a clean justification. The room waits. Elena stands silently, refusing to argue for her worth, refusing to apologize. The tension crystallizes. This is the moment where everything converges, rescue turning into reckoning. Julian speaks, not to defend the action alone, but to redefine the standard. He states plainly that the response was exemplary, that the outcome validates the approach, that the company will not punish competence disguised as disobedience. Resistance meets him immediately, legal language clashing with moral clarity. Julian holds firm, aware that this choice redraws lines that once protected him. He commits publicly to the program, to Elena's role, to accountability that flows upward rather than downward. The decision lands with a weight that alters the room. After the meeting, Elena finds Julian alone in the corridor, the noise of the event muffled behind closed doors. She thanks him once, quietly, not for the protection but for the conviction. Julian meets her gaze, the distance between them charged with what was risked. He admits, just as quietly, that he did not know whether he would choose correctly until the moment demanded it. The honesty shifts something essential. Elena recognizes the cost of his choice, the vulnerability beneath the authority. For the first time, she allows herself to imagine a future not defined by avoidance. The connection deepens not through touch, but through shared consequence. Later that night, a message circulates among staff acknowledging the incident and praising initiative. The tone is cautious but changed. Elena walks home under city lights, feeling both exposed and grounded. Julian returns to his office, the familiar solitude altered by purpose. Both understand that the turning point has passed, that they are no longer moving cautiously around each other but forward together, and that the next challenge will not ask whether they care, but how much they are willing to lose to protect what they have begun. All the shift from progress to backlash is swift and calculated, arriving not with confrontation but with paperwork. Elena more feels it first in the way conversations stop when she enters a room, in the glances exchanged between managers who once nodded politely. The pilot program continues on paper, but its support erodes quietly. Meetings are postponed. Resources are delayed. The language changes from encouragement to caution. Elena understands this terrain. Resistance rarely announces itself. It tightens slowly, waiting for missteps. Julian Cross senses it as well, though from a different altitude. Board members request updates framed as concerns. Legal advisors warn of exposure. Donors question optics. The same decisive action that earned praise now threatens stability, and Julian finds himself standing at the edge of the structure he built, aware that transformation invites retaliation. Elena becomes the unspoken focal point. Whispers circulate that she overstepped, that she enjoys special protection, that ambition disguises itself as altruism. She hears fragments in break rooms, catches her name followed by silence. The isolation returns sharper than before, because now it contrasts with what she briefly touched. She tells herself to endure, to remain professional, yet the strain accumulates. When a supervisor questions her authority during a training session, undermining her in front of staff, Elena feels the familiar tightening in her chest. She finishes the session anyway, voice steady, but afterward she retreats to an empty stairwell, breathing through the frustration. Julian receives a formal complaint later that day, cloaked in neutral language, citing confusion about roles and boundaries. The implication is clear. The company wants distance restored. Julian knows this tactic well. It offers plausible deniability while pressuring him to choose convenience over conviction. He calls Elena into his office, not as a subordinate, but as a collaborator. The meeting is tense, stripped of pretense. He lays out the reality, the resistance, the risk to both of them. Elena listens, arms crossed, absorbing the truth she already suspected. When he asks whether she wants to continue, the question carries weight beyond the project. It asks how much she is willing to endure, how much she trusts him to stand with her when the cost rises. Elena answers honestly. She admits fear, admits exhaustion, admits that she has spent her life navigating spaces that never wanted her fully. She says she will not beg to belong again. The words land heavily. Julian hears in them a boundary he must respect. He offers her an exit, one that preserves her position without spectacle. Elena considers it, feeling the pull of safety. Then she remembers the hesitation she felt the night of the delayed response, the seconds lost to fear. She declines. The decision marks the point of no return. The backlash intensifies. A routine audit expands unexpectedly. The program is placed under review. Elena's past is scrutinized, her incomplete credentials framed as liability rather than context. Julian absorbs the pressure publicly, but privately the strain shows. The power gap narrows not because he loses authority, but because he chooses to carry the weight alongside her. Their interactions grow more restrained, not out of distance but caution. The slow burn shifts from possibility to endurance. Late one evening, Elena receives notice that her contract will not be renewed under its current terms. The phrasing is polite, final. She sits with the letter, the familiar sense of disposability washing over her. When Julian learns of it, something hardens within him. He recognizes the maneuver for what it is, a calculated attempt to force his hand. The next board meeting becomes a reckoning. Julian speaks with clarity that silences the room, framing the issue not as personnel, but as values. He states that removing Elena undermines the integrity of the initiative and exposes the company's fear of accountability. He makes his position unmistakable. The vote that follows is divided, tense, unresolved. The conflict spills beyond boardrooms into public rumor. Elena feels the scrutiny intensify, her anonymity eroding. She wonders whether standing firm was naive. Julian, aware that he may lose support he once took for granted, prepares for consequences he cannot fully control. The conflict escalates not with shouting but with distance, with allies withdrawing, with silence where there was once agreement. Elena and Julian meet briefly after the meeting, exchanging few words. The understanding between them is heavy, unspoken. They are no longer navigating uncertainty. They are facing opposition. As they part, both sense that the next move will define not only the project, but who they become in its wake. The story no longer belongs solely to rescue or reform. It has become a test of resilience, of loyalty, and of whether quiet courage can withstand a system designed to outlast it. All the quiet climax arrives without spectacle, unfolding in a space stripped of comfort and applause. Elena Moore packs her locker after the final notice becomes official, her contract ending at the close of the week. The corridor is empty, the hum of the building distant, as if the hotel has already decided she no longer belongs to it. She moves carefully, folding the uniform she once wore like armor, placing it at the bottom of her bag. There is relief in the finality, a steadiness that comes from choosing dignity over waiting to be erased. She does not expect to see Julian cross again before she leaves. He has done what he could, and she refuses to let hope turn into resentment. Julian, meanwhile, stands before the board once more, not to argue, but to conclude. The numbers are ready, the language precise, the path of least resistance clearly marked. He could compromise, preserve alliances, allow the program to dissolve quietly while claiming progress in theory. Instead, he chooses a different end. He announces the formation of an independent foundation, separate from the hotel brand, dedicated to emergency preparedness and ethical response, funded personally, governed externally. The room reacts with measured surprise. This move removes liability from the company while exposing the truth beneath the resistance. It also removes Julian from the protection of consensus. He accepts the cost without drama. When asked about Elena Moore, he states plainly that she will lead the initiative if she chooses, not as a favor, but as recognition of expertise. The silence that follows is heavy, not hostile, but final. Julian leaves without waiting for approval. Elena receives the message hours later, not from Julian, but from an intermediary, outlining the offer with care. She sits at her kitchen table, the letter beside the textbooks she never discarded, the life she lived pressed against the life she might reclaim. The decision demands courage of a different kind, not defiance but acceptance. She calls Julian herself, her voice steady, asking one question about autonomy. He answers without hesitation, assuring her that the foundation will be built around accountability rather than control. The simplicity of the answer disarms her. They meet one last time before the announcement becomes public, not in an office or a conference room, but in the quiet of the training space that started everything. The chairs are stacked, the whiteboard blank. There is no audience. Julian thanks her again, not as a rescuer or a symbol, but as a partner in consequence. Elena acknowledges the risk he took, the isolation it invites. Neither romanticizes the moment. The closeness between them is real, grounded in what they have already lost. Julian makes one final decision, choosing to step back from the hotel's daily operations, appointing leadership that will manage without him. It is a quiet abdication that redefines power not as presence, but as purpose. The public announcement follows the next morning, measured and restrained. Elena watches from home, unseen, as headlines frame the story in simplified terms. She understands how narratives flatten truth. What matters is not recognition, but trajectory. She accepts the role with conditions that protect the staff she once stood among. Julian accepts her conditions without negotiation. In the days that follow, Elena clears her locker and leaves the hotel not in defeat, but in transition. Julian watches from a distance, resisting the urge to intervene, respecting the boundary they have both learned to honor. Their connection does not resolve into certainty or promise. It settles into something quieter, resilient. On the night before the foundation's launch, they stand together on the rooftop overlooking the city, the wind cool, the lights distant. Julian admits that letting go cost more than he expected. Elena admits that stepping forward still scares her. There is no embrace, no declaration, just the understanding that both chose alignment over safety. As they part, the city continues below, unaware of the small, deliberate choices that altered its rhythm. The quiet climax does not close the story. It opens a path shaped by restraint, integrity, and the fragile trust that grows when power learns to listen. The future remains unwritten, and that uncertainty, for both of them, feels like the most honest beginning of all. All the foundation launches quietly, without banners or speeches, just a rented community center and a handful of people who believe preparation is an act of respect. Elena Moore stands at the front of the room, not elevated, not framed as a symbol, simply present, guiding the first session with the same steady clarity that once saved a life on cold marble. Her voice carries assurance earned through consequence. Around her sit hotel workers, security staff, volunteers, people who have learned that waiting for permission can cost more than acting with care. Julian Cross watches from the back, unannounced, hands folded, letting the work speak for itself. He has learned to occupy space without commanding it, to witness rather than direct. The program grows in measured steps, attracting attention not for spectacle but for outcomes. Lives are steadier. Responses are faster. Confidence spreads in quiet ways. Elena's days fill with purpose, long and demanding, yet grounded. She returns to study in the evenings, textbooks finally opened with intention, rather than regret. The path is not easy, but it is hers. Julian steps further away from the spotlight, investing time where accountability is visible and impact cannot be spun. Their connection remains restrained, defined by shared values rather than labels. They meet occasionally, often over coffee in places where neither holds advantage, speaking about systems, about people, about the cost of choosing differently. Months pass. One afternoon, an emergency call comes in during a training exercise. The response unfolds with practiced calm. Elena coordinates, trusts the team, steps back when others step forward. The outcome is clean, effective. When it ends, applause does not follow. Instead, there is a collective exhale, the quiet satisfaction of competence. Julian meets Elena's eyes across the room, a recognition passing between them. Nothing needs to be said. Later that night, Elena walks alone through the city, reflecting on how far the distance stretches from the girl who folded linens in silence. She understands now that power is not a ladder, but a responsibility shared. Julian reviews a message from the hotel, a polite invitation to return in an advisory capacity. He declines, not with bitterness, but with clarity. He knows where his presence matters now. The surprise comes gently, not as a twist of fate, but as a choice fulfilled. Elena receives her acceptance letter to complete her nursing degree, conditional but real. She laughs softly, a sound that startles her with its ease. She texts Julian a simple thank you. He replies with congratulations, and nothing more. The ending does not rush to define them. There is no public declaration, no neat bow. Instead, there is continuity. On a quiet evening weeks later, Elena and Julian stand on opposite sides of a crosswalk, separated by traffic and time. They exchange a small wave, the kind reserved for people who know each other well enough not to prove it. The light changes. They move forward, each in their direction, carrying the imprint of a night that demanded courage and delivered consequence. This story does not promise that kindness always wins without cost. It shows that integrity asks for patience, that leadership begins when listening replaces control, and that rescue can be the first step toward repair if accountability follows. If this story resonated with you, consider what choice you would make when the rules hesitate and a life cannot. If you believe quiet courage deserves room to grow, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who values integrity over convenience. Your support helps us tell more stories that honor humanity in its most decisive moments. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next story, all.